Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Today I will to explain about chapter 15, Teaching Poetry. But before that, let me introduce myself first. My name is Sari Dewi and I'm from group 6. Okay, the first material will be presented by me. Okay, as we know that we already learned about poetry when we were senior school or junior school, so that's why I will explain about definition of poetry first, so you can see this slide about definition of poetry. Okay, the first slide about definition of poetry. Poetry is in poetry the sounds and meanings of words are combined to express feelings, thoughts, and idea. The poetry chooses words carefully. Poetry is usually written in lines. Okay, what we have is that poetry must have a very strong sense and proper intonation. And there are poetry elements of poetry. The first one is rhythm, sounds, imagery, forms, and types. It is about poetry elements. Okay, you can see this slide about rhythm. The first, it is the flow of the beat in the poem. It gives poetry its musical feel. It can be fast or slow, depending on mood and subject of poem. You can measure rhythm in meter by counting the beats in each line. Okay, next, sounds. I think sound is very useful in the poetry because sounds can make interesting for poetry, and writers love to use interesting sounds in their poems. The sound devices include the first rhyme, repetition, alliteration, and the last onomatopoeia. Okay, next, poetry form. Okay, sure, poetry has a form, such as lines and stanzas. Most poems are written in lines. A group of lines in a poem is called a stanza. Stanza separates idea in a poem. Okay, you can see about lines and stanza in this slide. The example lines: spring is here. It is line, and stanza: birds and bears. Birds and bears is stanza. This is example about line and stanza. Okay, next, types of poetry. There are many types of poetry. Some are acrostic, shape, couplet, haiku, quatrain, jamit, humorous, narrative, lyric, free verses. If you want to make poetry, you can choose one of the types of poetry. The example, if you want to make poetry, you can make types about humorous or narrative or so on. Okay, the teacher has responsibilities of a poetry class, so the teacher must prepare a poetry class as good as possible. Okay, you can see the slide of responsibilities of teacher of poetry. Okay, next, responsibilities of teacher of poetry. You can see this slide. There are responsibilities of teacher of poetry. The first one, classroom discussion, evaluate and grade student, prepare course materials, prepare and deliver lecture, and maintain student attendance records. You can read this slide. Okay, next, plan, compile, maintain, keep abreast of developments, select and obtain materials, advise students on academic, conduct research in a particular, collaborate with colleges, serves on academic or administrative committees, and the last is participate. It is about responsibilities of teacher of poetry. It is about my opinion about the teacher must prepare well in the class. So if you have the other thing about responsibilities of teacher of poetry, you can adding in your notebook. Okay, I think that's all for my material. So the next material will be presented by Sandra Aprilia Wijaya. Okay, let's say wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, I will be handle this part. This part we learn about reading poetry a lot. Experiencing the sound of poetry can take place in the classroom in variety of ways. First, the rule of a reader should shift from the teacher to students. It means poetry is read a lot, sometimes by single students, sometimes by peers for students, and sometimes collective reading with one or two lines reading by each member of the class. Individual, in pairs, or in group students can be developed an interpretation the poem experimenting. And second is memorizing a poem. Actually, many students find it's difficult to memorize a poem, but if the poem is what they like, it's very easy for them to memorize of the poem. Okay, next, writing poetry. Uh, in writing poetry, having children write in a particular form can help them to understand the complexity and simplicity of poetry, as well as to appreciate the craft of the poets they read. Okay, I think that's all for this material. Next material, Yessi will be handled.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Yessi Apriani. I want to explain about teaching poetry, and my material is Critics Guide to Student Poetry. Yes, as we know, poetry is literary works that we have studied since in elementary school. And Critics Guide to Student Poetry is provide instruction or advice in order to read poetry better and according with the rules. Here are some considerations that may help teachers or students evaluate poems. First, are descriptive words specific? Words like big, small, nice, good, bad, and so on. And the second is figurative language employed? And the third is, did the poet avoid cliches? And the fourth is, are the line endings effective? And the next is, did the poet reveal real imagination or creativity in his or her description? It means poetry consider real imagination or creativity from his or her description. And the next is, does the poem create a clear image of whatever is being portrayed? And the next is, was the title thoughtfully chosen? And the eighth is, did this poem hold many surprises, or was it fairly predictable? It means if someone read poetry, we can feel is surprise or fairly predictable. And next is, how could the poem improve? And the last is, what is the most effective element of the poem is written? And the next slide is the process of responding to poetry. Include three. First, reading aloud. It means that we must reading poetry more and more. Is memorizing it. After we reading aloud, we must remember what the poetry tell about. And the last is writing it. After we read and we memorize, we can write the poetry. And the next slide is the complexity of this process, suggests that teachers need to first provide ample time for students to explore their responses, beginning with initial free write or journal responses followed by small group sharing. In contrast, large group discussion in which teachers ask students to instantly interpret the poetry. And the second is appreciate the tentative, exploratory nature of response involving extensive revision and reflection across reading. Students need to recognize that poetry is difficult, requiring several readings, and students are more likely to revise and reflect on their response if they share the response in small group sharing. And the third is recognize that students may not to be familiar with these response strategies. Teachers may need to model the process discussing. Okay, I think that's all. The next presentation will be handled by Aulia Rahmi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Aulia Rahmi. Now, I will handle the next part. It's about using the four perspectives. So, teachers can help students toward a richer understanding poetry if they draw on the four perspectives. Similar to the discussion in the previous chapter, poetry can also use these four perspectives. There are a textual perspective, and a social perspective, a cultural perspective, and then a topical perspective. For the first one is a textual perspective. Students may initially react to the poem with a free write or in a small group discussion. Some students may need sort out what is happening by applying a number of different prototypical story. So for example is in responding the poem with title Corner. So students could list on one side of the page, the speakers and the cop's actions, and then on the right side they could list their implied attributes, beliefs, and goals. And then students could flesh out the story by determining what the speaker did prior to the encounter, and then what may occur after the encounter. And the next is a social perspective. Students could discuss their own social response to the speaker on the cup. So, students can give their own response to a poem by connecting their experiences and feelings when there is a situation in the poem. And the next is a cultural perspective. To understand that their responses to the poem are shaped by their cultural attitudes. So it means how the reader of the poem in conveying his poem, so that the poem delivered can be conveyed well and clearly to the listener. So the listener or student can give a good response to the poem. And the last is a topical perspective. Students could draw upon a number of related topics in approaching the poem. So for example is in historical perspective, students can read about various incidents of confrontation between police or army, and then they can use them relate to relate uh, to relate them to poems that will be made and based on their historical perspective. And I think that's all. Thank you and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.